Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Windows on the World. Tonight's show is called Truth versus Media. In fact, I actually typed into the description box a question: why is UK media a laughingstock? And I've got a variety of things I wanted to bring up tonight, but I've just seen in the chat box that I think it's Monthly Blimpton said they were listening to the George Galloway YouTube show and managed to get on there. Well, that sounds quite interesting, but again, is Galloway a unique voice? Well, maybe in some ways he is, but it's all part of the same narrative, really. There's places he definitely will not go. But tonight's subject is public and private crisis engineering, how all that crosses over, and an intellectual perspective on the climate change agenda. Now, this is really funny. It's a Russian perspective that was put out several months ago on the life and times of Saint Greta the Great of Sweden. It's actually very amusing, but it's really powerful, and it outlines the truth between the differences and the differences in truth between Russian intellect and so-called UK intellect, and we're going to look at that a bit later on. But it's funny, actually, yesterday I was at a friend's birthday party and we were just having a quiet celebration, and somebody was sat across from me and we started talking, and he said, "You probably won't agree, but this climate change thing is crap." Well, as you can imagine, quite an interesting conversation ensued over the next 45 minutes when I was very intent on telling him how it all started. And then we got onto several different subjects. But isn't that an interesting thing? You have to preface everything these days very carefully in case you are in the company of an extremist. But first of all, I'd just like to get on to our talks while I remember. And the bigger picture, or the Real Citizens Assembly, featuring myself, Piers Corbyn and Sandy Adams, sometimes just myself, will be going out all over the country. And the dates that we've got so far in 2020 are Saturday the 18th of January, 11 till 7 p.m. There's a free new media event, and it features several speakers, including myself. I'm on between 2 and 4 p.m. and it's at the Salt Cellar, 11A Church Lane, Oldham. That's OL1 3AN. That's the Salt Cellar, Church Lane, Oldham, and that's on Saturday 18th of January, and that's free entry. And I may be passing the hat round to get me petrol money from the audience if it's possible. There is an Eventbrite page for that. It's all linked to windowsontheworld.net. On Saturday the 25th of January, Fairborn, Gwynedd, North Wales, the Freog and Fairborn Village Hall, Beach Road, Fairborn, LL38 2EX. There's an Eventbrite bookings page for that. Please go to windowsontheworld.net. There's a Facebook page for that one as well. And on the 8th of February, just in the Corner House, 1 Christchurch Street, East Frome, BA11 1QA, 11am till 6pm. The Eventbrite bookings page is on windowsontheworld.net, and that's featuring myself, Piers Corbyn and Sandy Adams. Saturday 22nd of February, we're in Worthing, East Sussex. There's an Eventbrite bookings page for that, and the venue has not been put out yet. So go to the Eventbrite bookings page. Register your interest and we'll see you there. News on that will be forthcoming. Now, we're doing live streams on Wednesday, and I've been doing some really good ones with Eric Von Essex lately on the Eric Von Essex YouTube channel. The last one we did was all about how councils control the narrative with these public-private partnerships, how they get you into the hive mind, the consensus. We're going to be touching on that a bit tonight as well. And also, I wanted to let you know about our forthcoming film, The Smithfield Heretics. The Heretics of London is the title for the film. Also known as the Smithfield Martyrs, about people who were burnt at the stake for heresy in the 1500s. This is a really interesting film, and people who support us on Patreon will get access to the film. They'll get a free copy of the film because I'm putting it out on DVD as a limited edition to start with, and then it's going to be released on digital media quite a lot later. I want to make it kind of a special event and go around doing talks, so anyone who supports us on Patreon will get invited to that and also get a copy of the film. And also I'm putting stuff up on Patreon, trying to get people on board to support the show because it does need support now, and I am expanding it. And these live streams we're doing are on Wednesdays, 8 p.m. on a Wednesday. It goes out on YouTube while we're still there, and it's on the Windows on the World YouTube channel, and those have been going very well. What we do on the Wednesday show is a bit of an analysis of what we've been going to talk about on the Sunday shows. So the Sunday shows get included, and I've also got a lot of new information coming up. We're going to do a whole series on ancient history, so please do support us on Patreon. It's very helpful. At least it pays for the petrol money to get up and down the country. So yes, I'm also putting out the audio version of my book, which contains a lot of the information we put out in the shows, but essential and honed down, very focused information, which I've been very particular in the way I'm presenting. I was trying to put a book together that doesn't have any waffle in it whatsoever, because whenever I get books, I'm always editing them. I always edit other people's books when I'm reading them and pull out all the very prescient and important points. And I wish more writers would do this, because then we would have much more interesting books. Not all writers are good editors. And I think editing is one of the most important things with this information, keeping it very sharp, simple and clear. And in fact, that is the essence of communication. Communication should get something over very, very simply. Even very complicated concepts put over in a simple way actually show the intelligence behind the person who's putting the information out, because I think that's the most important thing, the simplification and interpretation of data, because we are in a kind of media overhaul of everything. It's that the media just actually gets in the way of everything now, and that's a bit of what we're going to be getting into tonight. But yeah, we've talked a lot about the controlling of the public narrative, and this week we are going to look at fact and fiction. The media, they just engineer crises, and so does the private sector. That's something I was going to bring up tonight. So the media engineering and private sector involvement of engineering crisis. The links in the UK between PR, public relations, and government intelligence is also what we're going to talk about, and that's just business. This is very interesting because it's something I came up against years ago. I found out that people who were working in business in partnership with governments were actually using this intelligence to degrade the lives of British citizens, and that's something that I'm going to be bringing up in some future shows. I think in the live stream on Wednesday I may go into more detail on this, because I actually uncovered a network of these people several years ago, so I do know that it goes on. And after that I found out that it was more and more connected. So the public sector is very, very connected with business and government. So all three are part of what is now this intelligence grid. I found out years ago that there were these private companies working to demonise people outside the accepted narrative, and I even found out the hard way myself. I'm going to be talking about that. And these people have a very different agenda than the one that they present to you. which, when you think about it, is not unlike the media that we have in the UK. Yes, I'm going to talk more about this on Wednesday, I think. So some business people introduced themselves to me, and they were actually running a website which was engaged in defamation of me and a few others. And when I put them on a spot about it, they disappeared. But I don't think this is an unusual thing. So if over the years all this has been apparent to other people, do get in touch, because I think this is a really interesting area, and it really does expose how our media operates also. Yes, the crossover between reality and manufactured hysteria and events. It's the inevitable outcome of the partnership between private enterprise and the state. Well, think on a global scale. Think of Serco and G4S, and then go down. It gets smaller. And then it goes into private small businesses which are working with the government. Whether it's an event to catalyse public opinion or an international outcry to action, this private sector now plays a huge part. Most people have heard of Halliburton. They're well known, but their UK counterparts, Kellogg Brown and Root, run the management of the Met Police. Not many people know that. This includes internal call operators, risk assessment and staff training. So the police are as private as G4S, and of course the police run G4S in certain parts of the country. And Serco, these organisations can control law enforcement up to getting you your lawyer when in custody. And they will be working on behalf of private interests. So if they're working with the police, they're supplying you the lawyer, and they have involvement in the courts, and they run the prisons. What could possibly go wrong? Yes, they do. They also take you to prison. So the solutions and the crisis can all be in-house. I think that's what we're getting to here. There are many crisis management companies. I'm just going to read out this. This is from a US crisis management company. Now, many people who listen to the show will be familiar with this, because crisis management has actually been involved with what is sometimes known as terrorism events. And the lines blur between reality, putting on drills, training drills, and what goes into the media. So if we have a media that is run basically on PR, I think that is the key to how this works. This is from an American crisis engineering website. Let's have a listen to what they say. The design, development, and leveraging of deliberately created crisis-level situations. While helping clients prevent or respond to crises is our core business, sometimes we are called upon to engineer a crisis on a client's behalf. What does this mean? These examples will illustrate. When someone wrongly accused of a crime is being railroaded by law enforcement, either the police or prosecutors, we can stir up support in the court of public opinion. Well, of course they can do this the other way as well. They can demonise somebody in public. And I know people this has happened to, so I don't think that it's unusual. Well, the media do it all the time. I mean, I found this out years ago. Even when I got known very slightly, I'd found that newspapers can make up stories about you. Usually they're quite amusing, but they can be very damaging as well. This is the sort of stock trade of the gossip columnists. But once you go higher than that and start really looking into it, it starts to get more serious in the respect that when I've looked into cases that have been brought against people, or people have been demonised by the press, the reality of the story is completely opposite to what the press have printed. So I think this is the lesson here. Never believe what you read in the press. I don't think that many people who listen to the show would. However, I think it's a point worth reiterating. It says, we can cause those driving the train to stop and think, maybe we're not going about this case the right way. When activists with the facts on their side and a willingness to invest in change want to take their case public, we can make it happen in a way that will grab headlines and build widespread support. Now, of course, we're used to this in the UK with the Soros-funded Open Society Foundation, which is running our Involve, which is the involve.org, running the People's Assemblies. So it says here, attorneys aren't allowed to influence the jury pool or jurists, but they are allowed to actively educate the public, and that's when they call on us. We can turn cases from low profile into high profile. So actively educating the public has definitely taken on a new meaning here, hasn't it? This company is called Bernstein Crisis Management. It's an American company, and it says here it's a specialised firm dedicated since January 1994 to providing rapid, highly effective strategies for preventing and managing crisis situations that harm people, property, business continuity, reputation, and the financial bottom line. Well, the financial bottom line can be the financing of the whole country, can't it? That's called the national interest. It says we guide our clients through every step of the crisis management process, from preparation to response, and are available 24/7 for assistance. Our more than 30 years of experience assisting clients worldwide makes us an absolute authority on preventing and responding to crisis situation. We also now have open infiltration. Remember this going back to the UK now. We have open infiltration and subversion of all events. So none of the organisations advertising crisis management are actually doing anything different from any media outlet. The crossover of PR and news has been going on since the arrival of rolling news channels on cable TV going back to the early 80s. But Bernstein Crisis Management quote on their website, "If you want to use the mainstream media, social media and modern communications to go on the offensive," in brackets we call it making the stuff hit the fan, "we have the experience, the expertise and team to make it happen. Anyone can claim that they can make waves, but decades-long experience in managing crises has given us a unique understanding of what creates a crisis. References available on request." And you contact Jonathan at Bernstein Crisis Management. But this is just one example of how media has crossed over with PR and controlling the narrative. And of course, it's all about the financing of the country, ultimately. But underneath the cover story of incompetence in bureaucracy, there is also usually a not-so-hidden reason. Let's get on to now a couple of things that are in the news. The bushfires in Australia have been more severe because the forests have not been cleared under these fake environmental policies. I was talking about this to someone the other night from Australia. The add-on distraction issue of climate change further helps to disguise the obvious. So climate change is just thrown in over the top of what are events that are occurring which are nothing to do with climate change, which are actually occurring because of and so-called environmental agendas, which is basically not clearing fire breaks in forests. So they've made them a quarter to a half worse than they normally would be. That's just an estimation, because if you go back and look at the bushfires in Australia, they've always happened, but we have a massive burning this year. And does that tie in to global governance? Yes, it does. It ties into land clearance. It ties into what is being talked about everywhere on the planet, the stuff we talk about every week through the United Nations Agenda 2030 policies of land clearances and getting people into cities. When people are fined for not cutting their lawns and fire breaks removed from forests and undergrowth allowed to cause fire hazards, and then those fires rage out of control, the fires in turn fit in with the land clearances of the UN fake environmental agenda, which is what we're talking about here, I think. Then it can all be explained quite easily. This, of course, never happens. Nothing is ever joined up in the mainstream media, which is what we're going to get onto in a bit. And it's actually from a Russian source, and it puts things clearly in perspective. And the brainwashed narratives that come out of the UK media are exposed by what we're going to talk about. The lack of any news in the news media, apart from focused propaganda campaigns, has never been more obvious. The situation in Iran, which has turned up in the new year to kick off the next stage of the project for the new American century, that was this neocon blueprint for overthrowing 7 countries in 5 years. They're a bit behind on that, but this was General Wesley Clark who made this statement in 2007, and it exposed this document which came out at the turn of the century called Project for the New American Century, which was also about the catalysing event, which was 9/11. And that came out, I think it was the late 90s or early 2000s. Obviously, I think the late 90s, actually, because obviously going back pre-9/11. But, that's interesting. We're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. So they're still trying to stir up trouble in Iran. It's a very difficult one, this, because that is a country which I think even Israel is very wary of, even though they are determined to attack. They may be a bit behind on this, as I say, but the drivers of this agenda will not let up. The provocation of Iran into a new Middle East war is now underway. So that's the start of this new year. Whether this happens or not will be the escalating story, which will obviously dwarf all others. Meanwhile, in the UK, let's get onto this, it's Veganuary. In this kind of post-truth world of words that make absolutely no sense at all, we've got Veganuary, so they're trying to make people go vegan in January, and lobbyists are talking trivia about it as usual. But advocates of red meat will begin a fight back against the growth of veganism this week at the UK's biggest farming conference, with claims that eating lamb and beef is vital because some plants and fish are being drained of their nutrition. In a speech at the Oxford Farming Conference, Alice Stanton will tell ministers, farmers and environmentalists, she'll make this speech, that key nutritions in some fruits, vegetables and grains have dropped by up to 50% over 50 years. Isn't that interesting? This may explain the lack of ability to string a coherent sentence together in parts of the population. Well, this lack of nutrition and UN propaganda may be the reason the UK has become increasingly brain dead. It's a very good point, this, isn't it? The lack of ability to isolate issues and get to the point could be to do with the willful descent into vitamin-free diets. It can't all be by consent, surely. People aren't devolving this much by consent. As the ability to repeat short manipulative phrases has become the only argument available, a very refreshing and, dare I say it, Russian perspective on, yes, Saint Greta the Great Thunberg of Sweden restored the words thinking and analysis to the media recently. Now, this goes back to October last year, but it's absolute gold dust. In fact, it's a broadcast that was in Russian from Russian Inside. Russian Insider, the website's called. Get onto that in a minute. Russian Insight, actually. It's absolutely brilliant because people on there accurately describe what the climate change agenda and Saint Greta the Great are really about. And it's in very stark, simple language. And I wanted to give it as an example of critical thinking versus our media. Now, of course, the Russians have their own forms of propaganda, but compared to what's coming out of the UK and its intelligence services and the Guardian newspaper, this is a breath of fresh air. There's the ability, yes, to repeat and just keep this mainstream narrative going in just about every form of media, this pantomime, then, I think you might like this. The views of these white men would have Guardian readers screaming hate and white privilege, except the whites here are not privileged, just engaging common sense and restoring morality to the hopelessly exploited. That's what this is about, which made it even more interesting to me. The lack of sense available is at an all-time low. Go back as far as you want to, and in no historical narrative will you find the level of stupidity as there is now. Now, I challenge people on this. Try and find a time when news stories were this banal and stupid and repetitive. I don't think you can. But I'd be very happy to find out examples if you've got any. I'm talking about ability to write anything factual or true. Russia Insight, that's the name of the YouTube channel. They put things into perspective. It was called Russia's Pundits on Greta Thunberg. If she wants to live eco-life, send her to the Amish community. Right, that's the title of it. If she wants to live eco-life, send her to Amish community. Now, the description of the video is Swedish schoolgirl Greta Thunberg has launched a global climate strike and then threw a rant at the podium of the General Assembly. Now, let me just translate this for you because it's absolutely insightful. It says, this was the commentator who was saying this, and then there's a few other quotes that come in. Combating global warming is becoming a big political and business project. Behind one unhappy girl, and this is a diagnosis, there are powerful PR specialists, profiteers and politicians from around the world. The US Democratic Party is writing a Green New Deal and is very popular. This project makes socialists flinch and wonder if it's legit. Financial companies have declared a green Marshall Plan. President Macron demands that transport companies stop using the Northern Sea Route. This is some kind of collective insanity that began back in the days when a former US Vice President and Democratic Party candidate, Al Gore, it says here, they even named him. Yeah, hang on a minute. Let me just get back to where I was. Yes, received the Nobel Prize for topics related to global warming. First, you should have a look at this girl. When I saw her, I thought about children's crusades. I really thought of historical events. They then play St. Greta's nauseating and ham-acted speech to the UN, which is really, truly cringeworthy. They then say, have a look at the loving gaze she gave Trump, and they show her twisted expression as she's like as glaring at Donald Trump. Then the commentator says, I feel pity for the girl. She suffers from several diseases. She has had some problems at school. The girl decided to go on eco-strike. We have to look at the family. The family decided that the main enemy is global warming and CO2. Her father is a famous actor. Her mother, and then they play a video of her mother, Melina Ehrman, doing this very arty kind of walkabout into a supermarket, doing this kind of post-truth, post-modern nonsense. And they just give it as an example without really saying much about it. In other words, this explains it all. Yeah, they then play this pretentious and irritating video of a mother walking around making these strange noises. Now, the mother, it says, I'll get back to the narrative. It says, the mother performed at Eurovision and took 21st place. What an outstanding family. Yes, it looks like it looks. The girl doesn't fly on planes. It's not clear who paid for this, but she went on a luxurious yacht with the motor turned off so not to harm nature. Now, of course, we know, most people who listen to the show, that the boat that she went on, the Militia, was a racing yacht originally called the Edmund de Rothschild E60. Edmund de Rothschild, of course, was one of the catalysts of the global warming narrative. Now, they didn't actually say that, but let's get back to what they actually did say. This is how she was brought to America. She entered New York on the yacht. It looked beautiful. For a month, the girl travelled on an eco-friendly yacht under eco-friendly sails, which are produced in not-so-eco-friendly conditions. And no one told this youngster that people invented the internet. She could just stay in Sweden. She could just talk via the internet without moving 80 men, without involving so much money, just to talk nonsense at the UN General Assembly. Now, why don't we have a media like this in the UK? I just looked at these very sort of stern-faced Russians just talking in front of an audience, and they laid it out as it actually was. And they stripped away everything. In other words, they edited it down to actually what it was. In fact, if you arrived from another planet and you looked at this Greta Thunberg phenomenon, this is probably exactly how you would express it, because this actually shows quite a high level of intelligence. So if there's intelligence out there, then this is how these events should be portrayed. So I think this is a brilliant example. It carries on. Just to talk nonsense at the UN General Assembly. She doesn't have the slightest idea of what she talks about. And the world says the girl can see the atmosphere is polluted with CO2. She can see the streams of carbon dioxide. She has special eyes. This is what her mother said. Are you crazy? Are you selling this to the world as the main event? It's like saying I'm standing on the pavement and I'm wearing skis. Either the skis don't work or I'm crazy. What's going on here? Number one news around the world. And then someone called Yakov Kedmi joins in and he says, when children are deceived and used to satisfy some base perverse needs, this is called paedophilia. This is political paedophilia. They take a child and use her. Moreover, this is a sick child. Everyone involved is a criminal. They are criminals just like those who gave guns to children in Africa and sent them to war. They are criminals just like ISIS, which sent children to kill. They disfigure this sick child. They are trying to speculate on the feelings of infantile, primitive and very naive people. And here they're, of course, talking about the UK media and the UK population. Not all of them, of course. But I can't imagine anything like this even being allowed on UK media without social justice warriors calling hatred and white privilege on them. Let's carry on with what it says. You were right about the children's crusades. They gathered them from across Europe, and children went with lofty purposes. The ones that survived were sold into slavery. This is how it all ended up. Now it's the same again, but at a new level of development. It's almost dialectics. The people who did this must go on trial. They must be declared criminals because they shouldn't treat children like this. Now, of course, she's not really a child. She just looks like one. Greta Thunberg. This is my comment, by the way. She's 17 now, so she's not a child. She's old enough to leave school. She's old enough to get a job. Well, she may not need to, but I think that what they're saying here is so near to what the truth is that I've never seen anything like this coming out of any media outlet. That's why I put it on the show, because it really proves the point we're trying to make about media versus reality. Let's carry on with what it says. Everyone who uses children to pursue political goals is a criminal, and they must be in prison. There are no such lofty goals for which children must be sacrificed. They mutilated her life. They took a child and turned her into this. And this is going to be worse. This is not the world has gone crazy, but some people have lost their last bit of conscience in pursuing their political goals. Trump is a good fellow. He listened to her and said she was a good girl with a happy childhood and she was going to have a happy adult life. The commentator adds, by the way, the 80 men who worked on the yacht went home by plane. It was an eco-friendly plane. Behind this same familiar name, Soros, the Gates Foundation, they invest in everything like this. I'm saying this because it was in open sources. In other words, it's not a conspiracy theory. What you'd get from the UK media is that the George Soros conspiracy theory, the conspiracy files on the BBC. But they're just saying, I'm saying this because it was in open sources. Who in the UK media would be intelligent enough to preface anything like that? Let's carry on with what it says. This is a new form of attack on the existing situation, on the development of the world. Soros has one god, money. For the sake of money, he almost killed the British economy just to make another 2 billion. He doesn't care about anything else. He doesn't care about the child. He can make some money on this. It's very sad that there are people who play into his hands. The applause to these infantile degenerates. Instead of arranging trial for those who arranged this, they applauded. This is their trump card in the struggle between Republicans and Democrats. Trump moves productions to the US and she says this is all wrong. Everything should be eco-friendly. If she wants to be consistent, she needs to destroy humanity as a species. The environment will be just fine. There will be no people. There is no logic in what she says. She is not educated enough to talk about it. She doesn't need it. She can see streams of carbon dioxide. This is what this fella says. When everything she said in her childish, infantile voice was said by the US Vice President, he received the Nobel Prize. He's talking here about Al Gore, of course. Now she has been nominated to receive the Nobel Prize. These are brilliant points being made here. In other words, yes, we had Al Gore being nominated for the Nobel Prize and he received it, and then she's now being nominated for the Nobel Prize for repeating the same nonsense. We had our own eco-friendly young man from St. Petersburg who went to Switzerland, and instead of studying, he's telling us we don't need any production facilities, that we live a wrong life. Send him to the Amish in the USA. Well, we can only give him a boat. He can't fly. That's the end of it. I thought that was absolutely brilliant, because what I've noticed about these Russian intellectuals, or even people with intellect from Russia, is that they have a way of getting absolutely to the point. And this is what we were talking about in our show last week with Clive from Critical Thinking. Do check out the live streams that we do every Wednesday at 8 p.m. I really want to get people on board with this. It seems to be reaching a wider audience, which we need to do. We are having quite a lot of success in getting information from around the country and around the world. But if this is going to survive, Windows on the World that is, and any kind of real alternative media platforms, I think it needs more support. And the support is very strong, but wouldn't it be great if we could organise real people's assemblies, real citizens' assemblies all over the country? So let's carry on with the show. Although there is propaganda everywhere, I have not come across this level of truthful engagement and common sense in any media discussion for a long time, concluding that section. But for an example of the opposite, on the world's best-known billionaire philanthropist George Soros, this is from Barron's.com. It's called Inside Philanthropy, names George Soros Philanthropist of the Year. So Barron's.com has stated that George Soros is now been named Philanthropist of the Year. You couldn't make it up, could you? It says here, Inside Philanthropy was founded by David Callahan, who was also a co-founder of New York-based liberal think tank Demos. Now, we have Demos in this country. The Demos over there is a media company, but we have Demos in the UK, which is linked to the intelligence services, doing very similar work, ironically. I'm not sure whether they're linked. I don't think they are, because Demos in the UK is definitely an arm of MI5. Well, they admitted it to us when we debated with them about 9/11. Let's carry on with what it says here about David Callahan from Demos US. Through our work on campaigns, Demos turns its ideas into public policy change. This is the new rollout of NGOs controlling the public narrative, which goes into what we were talking about at the beginning of the show. This just crosses over into public, private and government, which is an absolutely fascinating area. This is where terrorism becomes real. False flags become drills, become terrorism, become news, become pictures, which are then given to us through Reuters and Associated Press, and often pictures that are used which we don't have real proper references for. And this has been shown up time and time again with these events which are staged and which are a mixture of truth and reality. And this mixture of truth and reality is definitely what you would call the paradigm of the times. Let's carry on with what this is all about, this billionaire philanthropist George Soros and Barron's.com. It says, through our work on campaigns, Demos turns its ideas into public policy change, the C word, that will have a positive impact on the lives of young people of colour, women and working class people of all races. Can you see? It's all identity politics. All of these type organisations are all about divide and rule through identity politics. It says we use campaign tools and tactics to seize short to medium term opportunities to move progressive ideas into strong public policy at all levels of government. They're telling you like it is. You're telling you what they're doing. It says our campaigns team is composed of seasoned campaigners with backgrounds including activism, advocacy, community organising, electoral politics and state and federal lobbying. This is what we've been talking about for years. The Saul Alinsky Rules for Radicals. Saul Alinsky being this radical housing campaigner in the 60s in America, who dedicated his book Rules for Radicals to Lucifer, who has been the inspiration behind our new society here, the Obama Army in America, onwards into this new form of communitarianism or new global system. Some people call it communism. This is what we do in our talks. We outline this new system of governance, how it's rolled out by these think tanks, by NGOs, by charities, which are in themselves a shadow government, which are in fact taking over the world. I'm not joking here. We do cover it on all our shows. So you've got armies of so-called change agents. And this is part of the army, what we're talking about here. Our campaigns team is composed of seasoned campaigners with backgrounds including activism. Well, we've got our own version here, haven't we? Extinction Rebellion. We had it through Occupy. We have it in every form of public protest because, of course, there aren't any real public protests in this country, not real ones. We had it with the People's Assembly. We take you into your protest. We give you your banners. We tell you what you're going to protest about, and then we take you home. Everyone's safe and nothing happens. So this is really exposing how it all works. I think we're drawing together a few things tonight, but not dissimilar to UK Demos, this public policy think tank, this kind of advocacy group in America, is an arm of US intelligence, because they've just said they are federal lobbying, activism. So they're actually pretty much the same thing as UK demos. But let's get back to another article now, which is connected to this, all about Soros again. In 2017, Hungary's ruling Fidesz party, led by Prime Minister Viktor Orban, passed a law banning foreign registered universities that do not offer courses in their home country, a move that seemed to target George Soros' Central Europe University. Now, this is what these people are railing against. They're railing against the fact that Soros was kicked out of his own country. Well, he hasn't got a country, of course, because he's stateless. The CEU, established by the Hungarian-born Soros in 1991, has offered thousands of students from Eastern Europe the opportunity to study US-accredited graduate degree programs in a free academic climate. Oh yeah. Following the ban, the 89-year-old Soros decided to move the bulk of CEU courses out of Hungary to a new campus in Vienna, Austria, and pledged to donate another 800 million or so to support this effort in 2019. For his fight for academic freedom in Central Europe and his resistance to the rising tide of authoritarianism worldwide, Soros was chosen Philanthropist of the Year by Inside Philanthropy, a website launched in 2013 to focus on large philanthropic foundations and wealthy donors. What, a bit like Bill Gates? Yeah. You couldn't make up this type of reverse propaganda, which is why it's so interesting to hear this after listening to what those Russians said about St. Greta. It says Soros, who has an estimated net worth of 8.3 billion, founded Open Society Foundation in 1979 to promote democracies around the world. Is currently promoting democracy here with the help of the British government, who used 6 parliamentary select committees to roll out Involve.org, which is funded by George Soros, which gives you your own, yes, your very own citizens' assemblies on climate change. Everyone out there who thinks that these citizens' assemblies on climate change are anything to do with your opinion or your input, well, think again. In fact, if you think that these citizens' assemblies are real, don't go to Maidstone Crown Court. That's another story which we're going to be covering in the next few weeks again. And I've just been looking at what's happening down there, and more news in on the corruption in the police and the courts coming up in future shows. Just thought I'd throw that one in. Just get back to this anyway. An email sent to the organisation seeking comments wasn't immediately answered. This was to George Soros Open Society. Inside Philanthropy was founded by David Callahan, who was also co-founder of New York-based liberal think tank Demos. So the fellow who wrote the original article has written another article about how George Soros has been demonised while making him the object of his philanthropy. It's brilliant, this, isn't it? You couldn't make it up. So it's what this organisation we were talking about at the beginning of the show was saying, that basically we can control all narratives for you. Don't worry about it. You know, if your client's been demonised by the police, well, we can change that. But if your client's been demonised by the public, then we can get the police to demonise them as well, I should think. And that does happen over here. I know it does. But it says Soros, who has an estimated net worth of 8.3 billion, founded Open Society Foundations in 1979 to promote democracies around the world. It's donated 15.2 billion over 3 decades, with 1.1 billion pledged in 2019 alone, according to its website. Considering the foundation's far-reaching impact, Inside Philanthropy also named Soros' 35-year-old son Alexander as the most intriguing heir in 2019. The junior Soros serves as deputy chair of Open Society Foundation and also makes documentaries for the BBC, who say that anything about Soros being an agent of change or somehow enforcing his own version of democracy is a conspiracy theory. But again, an email sent to the organisation seeking comments wasn't immediately answered. And, of course, it doesn't have to be, because they've already buttered him up. But in the runner-up to all this of these billionaire philanthropists, I just thought I'd keep you up to date, is one Barbara Pickover of JPB Foundation. She was named runner-up to Soros after her husband, Jeffrey Pickover, the largest beneficiary of Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme, died in October 2009. This is real billionaire philanthropy coming to you, boys and girls. Barbara Pickover agreed to pay $7.2 billion to settle a lawsuit and repay losses to Madoff's fraud. The Jeffrey M. and Barbara Pickover Foundation, which the couple set up in 1989, dissolved. In 2011, Pickover resumed philanthropic... Wait a minute, how did she resume philanthropic activities after that? And you see a bit of propaganda here, setting up a new foundation called the JPB Foundation, with approximately 100 million that remained from Jeffrey Pickover's estate. Since then, the foundation has grown into the 24th largest foundation in the US by asset size, with almost 4.4 billion. The foundation supports programs in, get this, you're going to love this, poverty, elimination, environmental protection and medical research. Poverty elimination. Well, we know what that is. That's the Agenda 2030 policies of the UN to bring the West down to below third world standards. So that's what that's about. Environmental protection, well, we know what that's about. Land grabbing. Medical research, well, we know what that's about. Enforcing vaccination. So this is how billionaire philanthropy works. It pledged approximately 260 million in 2019 for all these wonderful, worthy causes. How could the world survive without billionaire philanthropists? How could it? Pickover wasn't immediately available for comment. Yet again, how come these billionaire philanthropists that he's giving awards to or wants to give awards to aren't available for comment? I wonder why that is. Well, let's look at their template social justice and empowerment website. This is another thing about this fella, right? It says, this Lady Barbara Pickover, to advance opportunity in the United States through transformational initiatives that empower those living in poverty, enrich and sustain our environment, and enable pioneering medical research, building agency, raising the voices and power of communities most impacted to identify needs and resources, mobilise and formulate solutions, promoting justice, advancing and defending the rights of people and communities to enable access to opportunities. I wonder if those are vibrant communities. I wonder if they're diverse communities. I bet they are, Generating public will. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Why don't they just say enforcing public will? Educating audiences to shift narratives and raise awareness of needs and solutions. Training and mentoring change agents to shut down any opposition, I think is what they might mean. Supporting research, originating and distributing research and knowledge to inform stakeholders' actions. Oh, this is the big society, the follow-on to the big society. This is the totalitarian new big society, originating and distributing research and knowledge to inform stakeholders' actions, control the narrative. I mean, this is great, isn't it? It's just part of what we talk about every week, the bigger picture of how reality is being controlled. Scaling and replicating, developing effective programs with high potential to expand impact, field strengthening, supporting diverse leaders, organisations and sectors to grow a healthy, progressive infrastructure, encouraging collaboration. I need collaborators. Fostering connectivity across organisations to effect systems change on a grander scale. Now that could have come straight out of the intelligence services, that one, couldn't it? Fostering connectivity across organisations to effect systems on a grander... In fact, I should do that in my MOD voice. Fostering connectivity across organisations to effect systems change on a grander scale. It's open society again, the same template that's now trying to run the whole world. Well, I think a return to simple language is definitely needed. The corporate manipulation of language has resulted in the vibrant, diverse deception that is everywhere. And as the agenda rolls on, it was reported on several media platforms this week. Get this. As the Second Amendment conflict heats up across the United States, here's another crazy conspiracy theory that has turned out to be true. The United Nations is hiring in New York. What positions are they trying to fill? Wait for it. English-speaking disarmament, demobilisation and reintegration officers. Now, if anyone was in doubt that the UN Army is a terrorising group of unprincipled mercenaries, look at their peacekeeping track record of rape, theft and corruption. This is the United Nations allegedly looking for officers to disarm the American public. Now this is being rolled out. So, Agenda 2030, the taking of cars, the taking of guns, the taking of freedom, all under the banner of sustainable development, which means everything and nothing according to the people who roll it out. Well, it means the mixture of development and environment. The development is the banks take all the land and they make all the money, and the people get pushed into cities and get taxed into oblivion. And then, of course, there's the depopulation agenda. Let's have a look at what the UN Charter of 1947 actually said, bearing in mind that they're advertising in America for UN agents to disarm the American public. Let's see what the UN Charter says. The UN and its agencies, properties and assets, wherever located and by whomsoever held, are immune from every form of legal process, search, requisition and confiscation, from any form of interference, whether by executive, administrative, judicial or legislative action, can freely move funds, gold or currency between countries, will be immune from taxation. The UN are immune from prosecution, but can themselves bring legal proceedings. Now, that's not my opinion. That's from their 1947 Incorporation Charter. So we're talking about a criminal organisation that's above international law. I'm just going to finish by reading this, which was written in 2015. UN peace operations adapting to a new global order. It's called A New Global Order by Mataja Peter. And it was from a book that I found on the internet. It's called actually United Nations Peace Operations in a Changing Global Order. In early March 2015, the United Nations UN Secretary-General's High-Level Independent Panel on UN Peace Operations, or HIPPO, made a stop in Cairo, Egypt, as part of its regional consultations on reform of UN peace operations. One of the discussion questions for the first session asked whether current UN peace operations in the Middle East are the right fit for today's security environment, and if not, what kind of UN presence makes the most sense now and in the future. Very soon into the session, a young diplomat from one of the regional states challenged the premise of this question, arguing that the only role for the UN is in supporting regional approaches. His passionate intervention opened a floodgate, with a speaker after speaker depicting the UN with deep suspicion. The message was clear. UN peace operations were seen to be a Western intervention into regional matters. The League of Arab States, the LAS, should deal with Arab problems the same as the African Union, it said. Now, there's a huge distrust of the UN all over the world, but they're the ones implementing global governance. They are a lawless organisation with a terrible reputation. So who would put them in charge? That's something to think about. Do join us on Wednesday. I'm going to go into more analysis, and there's going to be a new series coming up, a week Wednesday, we hope, on ancient history, which is going to take us off into new areas which I've covered in the past, but I'm going to expand on because I've now found some amazing research that I want to put out with the help of a writer. And I think more people are going to get involved in this. We've already talked, of course, in the recent past to Stephen and Evan Strong in Australia. Look at the Out of Australia theory, that the people who actually propounded and put forward the Out of Africa theory have now retracted it. Have you heard that anywhere, though? No. The media still repeat it as though it's true. The Out of Africa theory has now been debunked by the people who put it forward. There's something to think about, and something we'll be talking about over the next few weeks. Do support us on Patreon, get involved with our film, please book talks, and let's try and get more information out and get more information into us. I do thank everybody who sends in information. We have very faithful people listening to the show who are giving me great insight into what's going on to expand what we're actually doing. So that's it from me for tonight. Thanks to everyone in chat. And also, I will be with Eric Von Essex on the Eric Von Essex YouTube channel this Thursday, 7 p.m, I think. And I did a great one with Eric last week. Do look at that on the Eric Von Essex channel too. It's all about local council manipulations. How councils are manipulating the narrative of public opinion. That should be of concern to everyone, shouldn't it? We're going to be expanding on that too in the future. So that's it for tonight. Slightly tired here at Windows Towers, but we're going to carry on. Got a very full week ahead of us. Thanks and good night, everybody. Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and program stream at windowsontheworld.net.